What's going on, everybody? It's Murk back here with some more Draft League content, and today I'm going to be bringing you my next installment of Draft League Hot Seat, and we are going to be covering a mon that is not seen very often in Draft League format, mainly because it's normally banned, and that is none other than Deoxys-Speed. Now, Deoxys-Speed is a very, very interesting Pokemon. It's an extremely fun Pokemon to use in Draft League format, and I do believe, after being able to use it for an entire season in a league, that it is very worthy of being banned in the large majority of leagues. So let's kind of talk about some of the basics about Deoxys-Speed. First of all, it is the fastest Pokemon in the entire game, like out of every single thing that's imaginable at base 180 speed, which makes it just a ridiculous speed tier. This Pokemon has no equivalent when it comes to speed, which makes it a very, very interesting mon to build around and to build with and overall to use, and definitely a pain for your opponents to build against. So its stats are 50 HP, 95 attack, 90 defense, 95 special attack, 90 special defense, and of course that base 180 speed. Now, the fantastic thing about having a base 180 speed is that it outspeeds the entire metagame easily. With a max speed investment, it can outspeed a Choice Scarf Garchomp, which is base 102, and with no speed investment, it easily outspeeds base 120s, and with very minimal, it can outspeed mons in the base 130s. So if you don't care about Choice Scarfers, you can run this thing modest max special attack, max HP most of the time, where you can often or almost always choose to not have to run any speed investment on Deoxys, just because it's so incredibly fast. But the great thing about that is that you can also choose to run speed investment to outspeed a plethora of Choice Scarfers. Even with pretty minimal investment, you can outspeed base 70s, 80s, 90s, and with a lot of investment, you can outspeed base 100 Choice Scarf max speed mons, which is pretty incredible. This thing's speed is absolutely no joke, and while its other stats are not very outstanding, it's got 90 with it's got 50, 90 defenses across the board with 95 offenses. The fact that it doesn't need to rely on its speed stat while also being able to outspeed everything makes this thing very, very potent. Another thing to note about Deoxys is it has a fantastic move pool that's very well accentuated by Z moves, and also to note it gets Stealth Rock and Spikes. So there's two main roles that I've found are the best for Deoxys-Speed. One is an offensive hazard setter or just a hazard lead, or an offensive breaker slash sweeper, which goes extremely well with its offensive move pool, its amazing stats, and just its overall ability to beat teams completely. It's a fantastic Z-move user thanks to its great offensive move pool, and has very good coverage on both the physical and special side. Those special attacks are going to be the best way to go with Deoxys because it has access to two things that make it ridiculously good. One of those is Nasty Plot, so that it can get to +2 special attack, making it so that nothing is taking its hits, and the other is Psycho Boost, one of the most powerful stab moves in the game, coming in at base 140 special attack. This thing is absolutely no joke. With a Z move on Psycho Boost, it's turned into a base 200 stab psychic move, which is incredibly powerful, meaning if you're a Z move Nasty Plot set, you can set up a Nasty Plot, go for a Shattered Psych off of a Psycho Boost, and then fire off another Psycho Boost to boot, and you don't have to worry about the -2 special attack drop that it gives you. So it essentially would give you 2 kills if you play your cards right and your opponent doesn't have the right team to where it can take on Psycho Boost. So this thing really is a fun mon to use, and it's an extremely good offensive weapon. Now, obviously, this thing cannot win on its own in a lot of cases because it doesn't have the raw power. Even if it's running modest, it still only has base 95 special attack, and it doesn't have all of the coverage in the world, and it doesn't have the ability to beat an entire team on its own with absolutely no help. So there's a couple really nice roles that you need with a Deoxys-Speed team that will accentuate it and make it even a bigger threat, and also allow it to support the team if you decide to, because like I said, it has two fantastic roles as a hazard setter and as a breaker slash sweeper. So having a team that can both be supported by the hazard stack option while also being supported by the team itself so that it can sweep through opposing teams makes this thing very, very potent. So the first support that you would kind of want to go into with Deoxys would be breakers. Now, breakers that can mainly take down things like bulky dark types and bulky steel types, which are going to be the most problematic thing for Deoxys to take down, because it forces Deoxys essentially to rely on Focus Blast or all-out pummeling to break through those, and it's something that you can't always afford on a team, and it's not something you always want to afford on a moveset, because the main thing you want to be doing with Deoxys is spamming its no drawback moves like Psychic, Ice Beam, T-Bolt. Its coverage is really fantastic. I might as well go over it. Some of the things it gets off the top of my head: Psychic, Psyshock, obviously, Psycho Boost as the real kicker for special attacks. It gets Dark Pulse, Shadow Ball, Signal Beam, Thunderbolt, Ice Beam, which is pretty much all the special moves you ever need, including to go along with Focus Blast. And then its physical move pool is also extremely good. It gets Knockoff, it gets all the elemental punches, it gets Superpower, it gets some other support moves outside of offenses. It gets Taunt, Magic Coat, which are often seen on Uber's Spikes lead sets. It gets Recover, which is very useful, especially if you run things like a Calm Mindset or just a really defensive set, because it can have the ability to run defensive sets while still also being able to outrun an opponent's entire team, which is obscenely nice. So going back to the breakers, you want things that can take down bulky steel types, bulky dark types, and overall just big defensive mons that Deoxys doesn't have the muscle to break through. So some things to consider that I've both used from experience, that I've seen on the very few other Deoxys drafts around. The main other one from Burke, who drafted Deoxys team in the ISL a while back in Gen 6, and mainly just from postulating what I think would be really nice with a Deoxys-Speed. So from the things I've used, Manaphy, Scolipede, two very, very good Pokemon to accentuate this. Scolipede has two very good uses, being an offensive breaker for Deoxys, while also being a Pokemon that can run hazards so that you don't have to rely on Deoxys as a hazard setter. Because one thing to note if you want to draft around Deoxys, if for some reason your league allows it, and for some reason by luck that you're able to draft it, you want to have Pokemon that can set hazards so that you don't have to rely on Deoxys-Speed to be able to set them up. For example, on my ICBA draft, I had Deoxys-Speed, but I also had Scolipede and I had Chestnut to be able to set up spikes, and I also had other rockers like Metagross, Golurk, and Minior on my team, so that I did not have to rely on Deoxys as much to set up hazards, so that I could focus more on letting it do its offensive job if I wanted to. Some other cool ones to consider: any kind of offensive fighting type or fire type are really, really good for the job. So things like Conkeldurr, Infernape, Mega Houndoom if you want a cheaper pick and you want to use up your Mega slot. Any kind of Zygarde form also does the job very well. Basically any Pokemon that can spam ground is going to be a very good bet for this. Things like Tyrantrum can also be very good. Mamoswine would be a fantastic addition to this thing. There's a lot of really cool offensive things that you can do with a Deoxys-Speed, and since it is a pure Psychic type, it would be an advisable thing to form a Psychic Dark Fighting Core, which is a lesser known offensive and defensive core, but is a very effective one to put some pressure on your opponent, and it covers a whole lot of roles, so definitely focus on that. And next thing you want with Deoxys-Speed is pivots, things that can get slow momentum into it so that Deoxys is not forced to take a hit, because while it's relatively bulky, it still doesn't want to be taking huge chip damage, because often you'll want to be pairing it with like a Life Orb or something like that, and you don't want things to be able to hit it super hard. You want to get it free entry as much as you can, so things that can take mainly bug moves and also ghost and dark things, the main things that Deoxys are weak to, are important. So Zapdos is a very nice pivot for Deoxys, since it's able to get momentum into Deoxys, and it also takes the bug hits that might be coming its way, as well as it doesn't really mind not too powerful ghost and dark type moves as it is. Some other interesting Pokemon to go with it: bulky dark types in general are a pretty decent pairing. Things like Alolan Persian, Umbreon potentially, even though Umbreon's not a great Pokemon. The slow Baton Pass and the Wish Pass into it with its great typing and defenses is a very interesting pairing with this. Something like Silvally, I postulate, would be a very interesting mon to go with Deoxys. Basically, Silvally and Persian are kind of along the same role. The thing that I really like about them is that they can be a bulky dark type, and they have Parting Shot, which is a fantastic ability to help get Deoxys in so that it can set up and then just run through teams. And lastly, the third kind of role that you want to support Deoxys with is a couple different things. One, I'd recommend having both spin block and defog block, so things like bulky ghost type like Cofagrigus or Golurk, a Defiant user, namely like Bisharp, but you could also do Braviary or potentially even Milotic if you want to go competitive to block that. Those are two big important things if you want to focus on spike stack aspecting of the team, because Deoxys with Hazard Stack is an extremely lethal pairing because of how good it is at forcing switches, and then the damage it can deal out is really helped out by Hazard so that it can guarantee 2-hit KOs that otherwise could not. And the third thing that you might want to consider is a really good slow mon for Deoxys, for example Snorlax. And the reason you would want a slow mon for Deoxys is because one way that teams might try and counter Deoxys-Speed is by running Trick Room. So if you have a really reliable slow Pokemon that can underspeed mons in Trick Room, then you're going to dissuade them from doing that. Having Snorlax on my ICBA team was a very useful niche, as well as just being a good bulky Pokemon to tank hits that things like Deoxys would not like to take. So overall, Deoxys is a very interesting Pokemon to draft around. I found when I was drafting in the drafting stage in the ICBA, I found it was really interesting and kind of weird to draft around a pure Psychic type like Deoxys, because it's extremely offensively versatile while it doesn't have the most amazing defensive advantages, though there are definitely some times when you can run a more bulky spread. And now I'm going to show you guys what Deoxys can do in a battle, so let's go over into some replays. So this first one is an ICBA match between me and another competitor top, and in this one I ran a Hazard lead Deoxys because he really didn't have good removal, and I saw that I could just get them up pretty easily. In this game he did bring a Magic Coat Cresselia to dissuade that, but in the end I was still able to get a Spike and a Stealth Rock up, and he even after he managed to defog away, I still have my Deoxys in the back to get them back up. And the amazing thing about Deo is that with its speed stat, it can't be taunted easily, so you're pretty much always guaranteed your hazards up. If you have a Focus Sash, you're pretty much 100% guaranteed that you can get a Stealth Rock and a Spike up, unless your opponent extremely hardly counter teams or counter leads you. So that's one really interesting thing that Deoxys can do. But the more fun things that it can do is its offensive spread. So in this game, my opponent has a Tapu Lele, and as you can see, he does not have a Psychic Resist on his team, so you can just imagine the kind of destruction that Deoxys could do in this game. In this one, I had both Psychic and Psycho Boost, and essentially if the Psychic terrain was up from the Lele, then Deoxys was going to completely destroy anything on his team. And in his defense, his only dark type was Hydreigon, and I did have Life Orb Ice Beam, which would send that thing packing. So this game, I just get my hazards up, I get both rocks and spikes up, and basically I'm just getting more chip damage off on his team. Fun fact, if I hit a Mega Horn right there, I would have just won with my Scolipede right away, but it didn't matter because essentially what I was doing, I was guaranteed the win, because if I was able to get the Deoxys drop like I'm able to do shortly once I get this Lele in range, then I just go into Deoxys and I click Psychic twice and the game ends. Obviously, it had more potential. It could have done more than it did in this game, but you could see the potential. If you got Psychic terrain up, things would just drop. I believe after a Rock and a Spike, Lele just died to Life Orb Psycho Boost, which is absolutely incredible. So that's one aspect of it. Another one we're going to look at is one set that I found was really fun that I cultivated over the season was a max HP Calm Mind Recover set with 2 attacks. And in this one, I brought Bolt Beam with ICMZ. This was in my semifinals, and we'll just kind of show you what happens. Essentially, I'm just going to move things around, kind of see what he has to deal with it. Because of how his team was, I could switch my Deoxys into Latios, which is a really interesting thing. I could always take a Draco Meteor and then I could just recover it off, so that was definitely one interesting thing about this Deoxys set. And basically once I saw that Excadrill was his switch-in and that it wasn't scarfed or anything, that once I got a Calm Mind, I think I could just win this game outright with my Deoxys. So once I get it in right here, I'm just going to set up a Calm Mind, as he's going to be able to bring in his Excadrill, and what I'm just going to do is drop down the Sub-Zero Slammer, and it will just completely destroy this Excadrill. And from this point, he shows to not have any Choice Scarfers on his team. Even if he was like it wouldn't make sense for him to bring a Scarf Braviary, because he knows that I could outspeed it with my Deoxys. And basically my Deoxys would just win at this point, aside from the fact, because this Sylveon was set up fodder, aside from the fact where he crit me. So if he didn't do that, then I would have 6-0'd with this Deoxys, but you can still see the amount of damage it can do against a team. And lastly, I'm going to show you one final replay to show off what Deoxys can do. And if you can recognize this one, or tell from right there, this was from my ICBA Championship game, and the team that my opponent brought did not have anything that took hits from Deoxys. My set in this game was Stealth Rock, Nasty Plot, Thunderbolt, and Psychic with the Electrium Z, and this really shows the ability that Deoxys has to just tear through a team. So we'll just kind of get into it. Basically, I'm just kind of messing around, getting damage off, and finding the opportunity to get Deoxys in. And even though Deoxys wasn't my main win condition in this game, it still has the ability to win because of how fast it is, how hard it is to kill, and because of its strength. So essentially, I get in Deoxys, and it never switches out. So I'll just leave this playing as I continue talking about it. I just kill everything on his team. I'm able to threaten him out with because I do have the ability to run Ice Beam, and I get my Stealth Rocks up, which essentially sets Deoxys up for itself, because after Nasty Plot, everything dies, and even before Nasty Plot, many things still die. So I fire off the Electrium Z right here to get rid of his Ash Greninja, which was his Broken Mon of choice in this league. It was definitely a lot of fun, I might say, to play in a league where there were lots of Broken Mons to use. And Deoxys really showed how good it was in this last game, because nothing could outspeed it, nothing could take a hit from it, and nothing could one-shot it that could also take a hit from it. So that's kind of why Deoxys is so ridiculous. The fact that you cannot take it out in one hit, you cannot outspeed it, and the fact that it can just completely destroy your entire team. So Deoxys is definitely one of the more fun and interesting mons that I've ever had the privilege to use in a league. If you ever have the chance to draft it, I highly recommend it, and if you ever discuss whether you should ban it or not, I'd say ban this thing. It is undoubtedly broken. I obviously only have one season to show for it, but you should just take my word that this thing is absolutely ridiculous. It's an extremely fun mon to use. It has so many tools, and there is a reason that is banned in most leagues. So that is Deoxys-Speed. Definitely one of the most fun, one of the most interesting, and one of the most busted mons that is sometimes allowed in the draft league format. It's definitely a pleasure to be able to use it for myself, and I hope you all enjoyed this. It was definitely a lot of fun to be able to use Deoxys for an entire season, and I hope that you agree with what I'm saying. And if you did, drop a like, leave a comment, tell me what you thought about this, tell me if you thought I missed something, and with that all being said, I will see you all later. Bye.